two versions of the thunder god. One is a charming, noble hero who wields lightning with honor and sacrifice. The other, a broken, violent monster who kills for fun and serves a tyrant. But here's the twist. The monster is actually closer to the real Thor from Norse mythology. Today, we're diving deep into God of War's Thor versus Marvel's Thor. And trust me, the differences go way beyond just the beer gut. We're talking fundamental reimaginings of one of mythology's most complex gods, and what these interpretations reveal about storytelling, authenticity, and the nature of heroism itself. When Santa Monica Studio revealed their Thor in the God of War Ragnarök trailer, the internet exploded. This wasn't Chris Hemsworth with flowing blonde locks and a sculpted physique. This was a thick, bruising brawler with a gut, cold eyes, and an aura of barely contained violence. People called him Fat Thor, comparing him to Endgame's depressed version of the character. But that comparison misses the point entirely. Marvel Thor weight gain in Endgame was about trauma and depression, a hero who'd lost everything and fallen into despair. God of War's Thor. He's not depressed. He's dangerous. This is a god at the peak of his power, and his body reflects a life of indulgence, brutality, and unchecked strength. In Norse culture, a larger build wasn't seen as weakness. It was often associated with wealth, power, and the ability to feast without restraint. Thor wasn't just the god of thunder. He was the god of the common people, the farmers, the laborers. He was massive, intimidating, and real. Marvel made Thor into a space Viking superhero, and I'm not saying that's bad. Chris Hemsworth's portrayal brought charisma, humor, and heart to the character. He's the golden boy of Asgard, the righteous son trying to live up to Odin's legacy. His journey is about learning humility, becoming worthy, and ultimately sacrificing everything for the greater good. He's a hero in the classical sense, but God of War's Thor is something else entirely. When we first see him, he doesn't speak with noble purpose. He resurrects the world serpent just to pick a fight. He punches Jörmungandr so hard the serpent is sent backward through time. This isn't a hero proving himself. This is a weapon Odin keeps barely leashed. The visual design tells us everything. Marvel Thor armor is regal, polished, ceremonial. God of War Thor's outfit is practical, worn, splattered with the evidence of countless kills. His face is scarred, weathered, exhausted. This is a god who's been doing Odin's dirty work for centuries, and it shows. Now let's talk about who these characters actually are. Marvel Thor starts as an arrogant prince. The first Thor film is essentially a coming-of-age story. He's banished to Earth, learns humility through his relationship with Jane Foster, and earns back his power by proving himself selfless. Over the course of multiple films, we watch him grow from a brash warrior into a wise king. He loses his mother, his father, his brother, twice, his home, his eye, and half his people. By the time we reach Love and Thunder, Thor is searching for purpose beyond battle, trying to find meaning in a life defined by loss. He's funny, often using humor to deflect from pain. He's loyal to a fault. He believes in doing the right thing, even when it costs him everything. Marvel Thor is fundamentally good, sometimes to his detriment. His greatest flaw is his optimism, his belief that people can change, that Loki can be redeemed, that he can save everyone. It's heroic, but it's also tragic. God of War's Thor is not that. In Ragnarok, we meet a Thor who's killed countless giants, including innocent ones, on Odin's orders. He murdered Kratos' wife, Afe, though we don't know the full circumstances. He's an alcoholic, drowning his guilt in mead while still serving the All-Father without question. His own daughter, Thrud, is terrified of disappointing him. His sons, Modi and Magni, are dead, and while we see glimpses of grief, Thor channels it into more violence. But here's what makes God of War's Thor fascinating. He's not a villain. He's a victim. Mjölnir calls him the worst of the gods, and he's not wrong based on Thor's actions. But as the game unfolds, we see the chains binding him. Odin has spent centuries manipulating Thor, using him as a blunt instrument while simultaneously belittling him. Calm and reasonable. Odin keeps saying, as if Thor's capacity for thought is limited to swinging his hammer. Thor is trapped between his nature and his nurture, a weapon who might have been more if anyone had believed he could be. The drinking, the violence, the dead look in his eyes when he tells Kratos, "I don't enjoy this. This is a god who's broken inside." And unlike Marvel Thor, who has friends, allies, and people who believe in him, God of War's Thor is profoundly alone. His family fears him, Odin uses him, and he's too far gone to see another way forward. Until, potentially, he does. The game gives Thor a chance at redemption, a moment where he could break free from Odin's control. That's the tragedy and the hope of this version of Thor. Here's the truth. The Thor of actual Norse mythology is somewhere between these two versions, but he's much closer to God of War's interpretation. In the original myth, Thor is not particularly noble. He's a god of the people, yes, but he's also violent, quick to anger, and solves most problems by hitting them with Mjölnir. He's a protector of humanity and Asgard, but his methods are brutal. He kills giants constantly, not because they're all evil, but because that's his job. Some myths frame these battles as heroic, but many Norse scholars point out that the giants often represent nature, wisdom, and the old ways, while the Aesir gods represent order, civilization, and control. Thor isn't always the good guy, he's the enforcer. Marvel softened Thor considerably. They made him more palatable for modern audiences, turning him into a superhero in the traditional sense. There's nothing wrong with this approach. It gave us a compelling character and some incredible stories. But it's worth noting that Marvel's Thor is heavily filtered through a modern, Western lens of heroism. He's more King Arthur than he is the Thor of the sagas. God of War's version leans into the darker aspects. The myths describe Thor as having a massive appetite, drinking entire oceans, and killing for sport. In one story, Thor visits a giant named Utgarida Loki and competes in drinking contests and tests of strength, some of which he fails, because even Thor has limits. But when he gets angry, he threatens to smash everyone there. The myths consistently portray Thor as powerful but not particularly bright, easily provoked, and incredibly violent. The detail that Santa Monica Studio nailed? Thor's relationship with his family. In mythology, Thor genuinely loves his wife Sif and his children. When Loki cuts off Sif's hair as a prank, Thor threatens to break every bone in his body until Loki fixes it. God of War captures this. Thor clearly cares about Thrud, even if his methods are terrible. His grief over his son's deaths is real. He's not a sociopath, he's a deeply damaged person who doesn't know how to process emotion except through violence. Even the detail of Thor being killed by Jörmungandr, the world serpent, in Ragnarök comes straight from the myths. Thor kills the serpent, but only makes it 9 steps before dying from its venom. God of War plays with this prophecy throughout the game, creating tension around when and how this death might occur. Marvel's cinematic universe, Thor does pull from mythology in places. His hammer Mjölnir, his rivalry with Loki, his role as protector, these are all mythologically grounded. But the character himself is more inspired by Marvel Comics' Thor, who was deliberately created in the 1960s as a superhero first, mythological figure second. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby wanted to create the most powerful hero they could imagine, so they took a mythological god and gave him a comic book origin story. That Thor then evolved over decades into the character Chris Hemsworth portrayed. What's fascinating is that both adaptations are valid. Marvel asked, what if we took the idea of Thor and made him the ultimate hero? God of War asked, what if we took the reality of Thor and explored what that would actually look like? One is aspirational mythology, the other is grounded mythology. Before we go further, I want to hear from you. Which version of Thor do you think is more interesting? The heroic Avenger or the brutal god of God of War? And more importantly, which one do you think is closer to the real Norse mythology Thor? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you're enjoying this breakdown, hit that like button. It genuinely helps the channel grow, and I read every comment. Now, let's talk about the mythology itself, because this is where things get really interesting. Let's talk about the hammer, because how each version wields Mjölnir reveals everything about their character. In Marvel, Mjölnir is tied to worthiness. Whosoever holds this hammer, if he be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor. It's a moral litmus test, a symbol of heroism. When Thor can't lift it in the first film, it's because he's not yet worthy. When Captain America lifts it in Endgame, it's one of the most triumphant moments in the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe because it confirms Steve Rogers' heroism. The hammer is, fundamentally, good. God of War throws that entire concept out. In Ragnarok, Mjölnir is just a weapon. An incredibly powerful, devastating weapon, but there's no worthiness enchantment. Thor uses it because it's his, and he's strong enough to wield it. In fact, the game reveals that Mjölnir was forged by the dwarves Brock and Sindri, the same brothers who forged Kratos' Leviathan axe. The Leviathan was made to counter Mjölnir, imbued with ice magic to oppose Thor's lightning. This gives the weapons a yin-yang relationship, but neither is inherently righteous or evil. This fits the mythology better. In the Norse myths, Mjölnir wasn't about worthiness, it was about power. Thor could wield it because he wore iron gloves and a belt that doubled his strength. The hammer was so heavy that no one else could lift it, but that was physics, not morality. Thor used Mjölnir to kill giants, defend Asgard, bless marriages, and sometimes just because he felt like it. It was a tool, not a judgment. The powers themselves differ too. Marvel Thor can summon the Bifrost, fly through space, channel lightning without his hammer, as he learns in Ragnarok, and eventually wields both Mjölnir and Stormbreaker. His powers are clean, cinematic, often shown in bright, colorful displays of lightning and energy. When he arrives in Wakanda in Infinity War, it's a moment of pure heroic triumph. He's the cavalry arriving to save the day. God of War's Thor is more visceral. When he summons lightning, it's not a light show, it's a storm. His attacks are heavy, crushing, overwhelming. He doesn't fly so much as he launches himself through the air with concussive force. The game emphasizes weight. You feel every swing of Mjölnir through the screen, hear the thunder crack with each impact. This Thor doesn't fight with precision or grace, he fights like a natural disaster. The famous scene where Thor punches Jormungandr through time isn't magic or a special power. It's just him hitting something so hard that reality breaks. That's God of War's Thor in a nutshell. Overwhelming, brutal force without restraint. The company a character keeps says everything about who they are, so let's examine Thor's relationships in both versions. Marvel Thor relationships define him. His bond with Loki is the emotional core of multiple films, a complicated brotherhood filled with betrayal, reconciliation, love, and loss. His friendships with the Avengers, particularly his mentorship relationship with Captain America and his odd couple dynamic with Hulk, show his capacity for growth and connection. His romance with Jane Foster, while somewhat underdeveloped in the films, represents his bridge between godhood and humanity. Even his later friendship with the Guardians of the Galaxy shows a Thor learning to find family again after losing everything. These relationships soften Thor, humanize him, give him reason to be better. When he nearly kills Thanos in Infinity War, but fails to aim for the head, it's because he wanted Thanos to know who killed him. A moment of ego that costs half the universe. But he learns from it. By Endgame, he's broken but not beyond redemption. His mother tells him everyone fails at who they're supposed to be. The measure of a person is how well they succeed at being who they are. God of War's Thor has no such support system. His wife Sif is absent. We never meet her, though she's mentioned. His relationship with his children is strained at best. Modi was cruel and abusive before Kratos killed him. Magni seemed more capable, but he's dead too, and Thor never got closure. Thrud is the only one left, and she's desperate for her father's approval while simultaneously terrified of his rage. Thor's real relationship is with Odin, and it's profoundly toxic. Odin is a master manipulator who spent centuries convincing Thor that he's only valuable as a weapon. Every time Thor shows doubt or hesitation, Odin redirects him with a combination of guilt, duty, and carefully placed insults. Calm and reasonable isn't advice, it's a leash. Odin doesn't want Thor to think. He wants Thor to obey. The tragedy is that Thor knows this on some level. When he meets Kratos, there's a strange moment of recognition. Two fathers who failed their children, two warriors used by cruel gods, two men defined by violence who might have been something else. Kratos offers Thor a glimpse of another path. He's proof that even a monster can change, can break free, can choose differently. The question is whether Thor can make that choice. Some players see hope in his final moments, others see a man too broken to save. That ambiguity is intentional, and it makes God of War's Thor infinitely more tragic than the Marvel version. Marvel Thor loses everything but finds himself. God of War's Thor has nothing left to lose, but can't find a way out. So what do these two radically different takes on the same God tell us? Marvel Thor teaches us about resilience, growth, and the power of choosing heroism even in the face of overwhelming loss. His story is aspirational. It says that no matter how far you fall, you can rise again. That worthiness isn't about perfection, it's about perseverance. That even gods can learn humility. In a franchise filled with heroes, Thor stands out because his journey is so deeply personal. He doesn't just save the world, he saves himself. God of War's Thor teaches us about cycles of abuse, the cost of violence, and how even the mightiest can be enslaved. His story is cautionary. It shows how trauma and manipulation can turn someone into exactly what they hate. How being strong doesn't mean being free. How sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who've never been given permission to be anything else. He's a mirror held up to toxic masculinity, to the idea that strength and violence are the only things that matter. Both versions are powerful because they ask different questions. Marvel asks, what kind of hero would a god be? God of War asks, what kind of monster would a god become? Neither answer is wrong. They're exploring different aspects of the same archetype, filtered through different storytelling lenses. One is a blockbuster superhero epic, the other is a mature, narrative-driven exploration of mythology and consequence. What makes this comparison so fascinating is that both exist simultaneously in pop culture, showing two completely different paths for the same character. And depending on what kind of story you want, what themes resonate with you, either version might be the real Thor in your mind. At the end of the day, God of War's Thor and Marvel Thor are both valid interpretations of a mythological figure that's been reinvented countless times over thousands of years. The Norse people themselves probably had different versions of these stories, depending on who was telling them. Mythology was never meant to be static. It evolves with every retelling. What matters is what these characters make us feel, what they make us think about, and how they expand our understanding of these ancient stories. Whether you prefer the heroic Avenger or the tragic Enforcer, both versions prove that Thor, in any incarnation, remains one of the most compelling figures in mythology. If you made it this far, thank you for joining me on this deep dive. This is MythMode, where we explore the legends behind the games we love. If you enjoyed this analysis, subscribe to the channel. We've got plenty more lore breakdowns, theories, and mythological deep dives coming your way. Until next time, stay legendary.